We all know that President Trump is not shy about blasting former presidents. In fact, he's even said Barack Obama has committed the biggest political crime in American history. But then when asked exactly what that crime was, Trump could not name it.
What is the crime exactly that you're accusing him of?
You know what the crime is. The crime is very obvious to everybody. All you have to do is read the newspapers, except yours.
I still don't exactly know what even the charge is. But now Trump is not missing an opportunity to, at least in my view, be pretty petty. President, he will reportedly break yet another White House tradition by refusing to unveil the portrait of President Obama that will hang at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Trump, he's also criticized George W. Bush for many things, including Iraq, and also he blasted Bush for having the temerity to post this video intended to call for unity in the face of a pandemic.
In this time of testing, we need to remember a few things. Let's remember that the suffering we experience as a nation does not fall evenly. In the days to come, it will be especially important to care in practical ways for the elderly, the ill, and the unemployed. Finally, let us remember how small our differences are in the face of this shared threat. In the final analysis, we are not partisan combatants. We are human beings, equally vulnerable and equally wonderful in the sight of God. We rise or fall together, and we are determined to rise. God bless you all.
I think probably the last word you'd use to describe that is divisive. However, the president didn't see it that way. He retweeted a Fox and Friends weekend host who called out Bush for not defending Trump during impeachment. Well, my next guest spoke with Trump about his complex relationship with former presidents, and her new book gives an inside look at all of those interesting dynamics. It's called Team of Five: The President's Club in the Age of Trump. Let's bring in the author, Kate Andersen Brower. Kate, thank you for the time.
Thanks for having me.
You know, it seems, every day, let alone week after publishing, there's another wrinkle to this interesting dynamic, certainly in an election year as well. But one of the things you take away from the book is that every person, maybe with the exception of the current occupant of the White House, is humbled once they sit behind that desk in the Oval, and they realize, even though they share differences and maybe some similarities with their predecessors regardless of party, that there's a humility involved because of the gravity that comes with the job. That is with the exception of this president. Did you find that they all maybe even felt bad a little after their presidencies, that they were tough on something they said about the president before they sat in the chair or whatever? And then you had that meeting last year with the president. It is starkly different, and it doesn't matter if they're a Republican or a Democrat. It's like now and then.
Yeah, I mean, there have been presidents in the past, like Jimmy Carter, who was very, very critical of George W. Bush and the war in Iraq. And he apologized to Bush for that at Bush's presidential library opening. And he said, you know, I was a little bit rough on you. And Bush said, oh, hush, it's fine. So there have been presidents who have been critical. Donald Trump is unprecedented. He is an outlier. He is a disruptor, and he's gone out of his way to criticize the predecessors, every living president. So I think that there's a sense that he is outside the President's Club. And when I interviewed him and asked him about the President's Club in the Oval Office, he said, look, I'm not going to be welcomed in it, and I don't care.
You write in your book that if you go through history, when there are times of crisis, presidents will reach out to predecessors for both advice, but also to be the face of the American response. In fact, I didn't realize, but in your book you talk about how JFK literally had 3 of the former living presidents to help him navigate or at least get their thoughts on the Cuban Missile Crisis. We've seen recent presidents send out former presidents to be our face, whether it be in Haiti or around where we've had global disasters. That doesn't even seem to approach the radar of this president in terms of asking some of his predecessors how he should handle, let's say, a pandemic. In fact, I guess it would be perceived by him maybe as a sign of weakness to do it.
I think so. I mean, I talked to a former top Trump official who said he heard Trump say terrible things about his predecessors in private. And we've heard him say terrible things in public about them too. I'm not sure how much worse it could get. But this person also told me, isn't it ironic that Donald Trump feels more comfortable calling up strongmen autocrats like Putin and Erdogan than calling up Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, or even George W. Bush, his most recent Republican predecessor?
Presidents rarely get together, I guess, for unveilings of presidential libraries and also, sadly, passings. To Bush 41's funeral, talk about the dynamics behind the scenes about even inviting President Trump, given some of the things he had said. And then, moreover, what that dynamic in the room was apparently like.
Well, I did. I asked Trump what he thought of the Bushes, the fact that the Barbara Bush said, a book had come out shortly before our interview where Barbara Bush had revealed that she was getting physically ill because of Donald Trump. And he said, I said some unkind things about Jeb Bush, and George H.W. Bush was a family man, and I can understand why he didn't like me. But I was honored to be included in his funeral. When I spoke with people who work for the Bushes, they said it was key that Trump come to his funeral because they saw John McCain's funeral and they saw how the story quickly became about Donald Trump not attending the funeral and Trump versus McCain. And they didn't want Bush's funeral to be overshadowed with that negativity. And I think that the fact that Trump showed up is a sign that really the story wasn't about Trump that day. It was about celebrating Bush.
And there's interesting friendships that we saw develop. There was almost a father-son relationship with Bush 41 and Bill Clinton. In fact, Bush 41 insisted that Clinton come along with him as they go around the world on relief efforts. We even saw a little moment where Michelle Obama and Bush 43, passing mints, I guess, at the funeral, and on more than one occasion, joking clearly with each other. And then you get to now. Does the current president look at his predecessors and their administrations as basically, somehow horning in on his rightful place right now? Does he look at them? How does he look at them?
I think he looks at them with disdain. I mean, I asked him if he has more empathy for the men who came before him now that he's sitting in the Oval Office faced with the biggest decisions of the country. And he said no. He was handed a mess from Obama, he said. He criticized George W. Bush's Iraq war. He said that was the worst mistake in history. So he doesn't mind that he's ostracized from the club. And in fact, as I was walking out of the Oval Office, he said, "Say hi to President Bush for me," in a voice that was just laden with sarcasm. He doesn't have a lot of respect for these men.
Kate, there's no way of knowing, but I'm going to ask you to hazard a guess because there's two conflicting pictures of W. Bush in that in one respect, he's been very quiet, and he hasn't. He held his tongue, and he hasn't been critical. And he was that way, I should also say, with certainly under the Obama administration, vis-a-vis Trump. But there's one exchange you have in the book where a one-time Trump aide who knew Bush said, "You know what? I'd love to say a lot of things, but I can't be critical." W asked him why, and he said, "Well, it's out of loyalty." He said, "Why? He showed no loyalty to you." Do you get the sense that if asked, that depending on the situation, Bush 43 might even come out against President Trump in this coming election?
That's an excellent question. I do not foresee that happening. I think privately, I also interviewed a White House florist who is close with the Bushes and went down to visit them at their Florida house shortly after the election in 2016. And he said, he brought up the subject of Donald Trump, and Bush said, "Can't we just finish our lunch? Can't we just enjoy our lunch? I don't want to talk about him." I think Bush feels a lot of pressure to take the same path that his father took with Bill Clinton, and no matter what, not come out and criticize the sitting president, even though when I interviewed one of Bush's closest friends, I said, "How does Bush feel about this?" And his friend said, listen, we got through the Civil War, we can get through the Trump presidency. So it tells you something if Bush is comparing this to the Civil War, the idea that he really doesn't like where things are going and how divisive the president is. But I can't see him ever coming out and endorsing a Joe Biden. I mean, that would be a huge story and a break with the party that I don't think he would be able to stomach that.
You know, Kate, they always say sometimes the best perspectives are from folks that are in the room but not seen. And I know you spoke to some of the staff at the White House about the current occupant and the first family. What do they say the president's like behind closed doors?
Trump behind the scenes is actually very kind to them in the residence. He plays with his grandkids. That this persona that he puts on Twitter and in his public remarks is really that. It's really a bit of an act. And even when I interviewed him, he was engaged in the conversation. He was very nice. I mean, I think that what we see is a playing to his base. And I think he thinks that the base wants to see this level of resentment and anger and almost like a wrestling match in politics.
It's a fascinating book. Again, it's called Team of Five, The President's Club in the Age of Trump. Kate Brower, appreciate a few minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Up next, for most of the program, we've been telling you a lot about the bizarre things that President Trump has been doing here by the hour, let alone the day. Now, after the break, I'm going to show you how it's not even the tip of the iceberg, and unfortunately, I'm going to prepare you, it gets much worse.